Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics live from Ron Joyce Stadium, home of Tom's McMaster Marauders for Homecoming 2024. McMaster versus the Western Mustangs.
Mhm.
Tom, we have a great slate of games this weekend, some major rivalry matchups. It's Panda weekend as well, but we're here for homecoming. We'll get it set up. We'll talk about all these games and much more. But Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
I'm doing so well, my man. Anytime that you and I get together, it's always a great day. And to be live and direct from my home at Ron Joyce Stadium for an unbelievable setting, a sold out McMaster game, first time in 10 years to have a complete sellout crowd here. I am so excited to be a part of this game.
No, it's going to be an awesome atmosphere. If you can tell from the stream, we are in, well, I don't know my cardinal directions at this, but we got the stands in the background. So no doubt going to fill in. We got the players going through their warm up. So it's going to be an awesome time here. As you
Mhm.
mentioned, a sold out event. And like we did when we did our game day live from Guelph, for the Guelph MAC game, we're actually going to flip the script a bit. We're going to save the home game, the game we're live from last. But before we jump into the other games, you kind of alluded to this. We were talking about it earlier. It's been now 5 years since a proper homecoming, an official homecoming here at
Yeah,
McMaster.
something like 5 or 6 years since it's actually been an official homecoming. There were some less than reputable folks who did some choice actions that caused our official homecoming to go away, and it is back this year. The amount of alumni that have reached out to me and saying that they are coming by is unbelievable. We should see people from all across McMaster's history, from the 2000s and that Yates Cup team to my day, and even the guys from the 2019 team. We're going to have a ton of former Marauders in the stands here. Everybody is excited. There hasn't been this much excitement around the program since 2019 when they won the Yates Cup. I'm just saying. I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
yeah. Well, and we have possible encounter with the quarterback from that team. We're hoping we run into him
Mm-hmm.
while we're here. Again, the beauty of the game day live is that, well, it's live and anything can happen. But Tom, before we dive into this game, we'll probably speak on it again when we get to the Western MAC portion of it. Like, what does homecoming mean for you? Like, what are your memories? You think about the experience being on this field. We know what Hamilton football brings in terms of from the junior level all the way up to the professionals and loving those Ticats.
Mm-hmm.
Here, McMaster homecoming. This is a storied team. This is a storied university within OUA and U Sport football. Like, what does that mean to you? Your memories of being on the field here for homecoming?
The thing that really sticks out to me is the amount of alumni and the amount of people who would come back and say they wanted to be a part of the program, or hey, this is what we did when we were here, we beat this team, these are my memories. And it really just made you feel like you were truly a part of that McMaster community and how important this was to all of the former alumni. But the thing that most sticks out in my head is 2011. We have a homecoming game. It's against the Waterloo Warriors, but our celebrity guest speaker that came in before the game, Mr. Pinball Clemens. And he came up to us, and obviously it's my first time I'm dressing at home in my first year, and I'm all over the place. A few of the other guys are obviously more calm, but it's my first experience. And Pinball comes up with a line that I will never forget, and he goes, "All it comes down to, every man, every play, every down, all day. If you take care of all of that, you will have success. You will be just fine." And I've never forgotten that. It was an unbelievable experience. Having Pinball as the Hall of Famer that he is, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. So that's my homecoming experience.
All I heard from that is that Hamilton McMaster fans, you can thank the Argos for your 2011 Vanier Cup championship. So go double blue. With that in mind, let's dive into the games. Like we said, we're skipping over Mac
Mhm,
Western to save
mhm,
that for last. It's a beautiful slate of games. We're getting to that stage of the season where it's we're getting a lot of these 1 o'clock
mhm,
games. It's a
mhm.
beautiful day in Southwest Ontario. So for that purpose alone, I'll let it slide. But we'll jump over this game and we'll dive into Queens at Laurier. Queens coming off the loss against these Western Mustangs in London on Western's homecoming. Obviously, biggest thing from that, we saw no Alex Freak and a number of other things we'll get into.
Mhm, mhm.
And for Laurier, this team is rolling 5-0 on the season. They just keep picking up wins game after game. We've talked about some of the things that when you're a team that's as excellent as they are,
Mhm.
that you start to nitpick a little bit here and there, but realistically, it truly is nitpicking. And they came off a formidable win against a revamped Ottawa Gigi's team last week at home as well.
Mhm.
What are your initial thoughts seeing this matchup, Queens versus Laurier? Another great game of great jerseys on the field. Just the
Oh,
color schemes, the histories of these programs.
what iconic, absolutely iconic settings here with Laurier and Queens. I'm really just excited to see. Well, I was excited to see the offenses and how things were going. I don't know. We don't know for sure the status of Mr. Alex Vreeken, but based off of everything that we've heard as rumors, I don't think that he is playing in this game, which is a massive blow to that Laurier staff, obviously. But when you look at, or excuse me, the Queen staff, but for that Laurier offense, they have been rolling 486 yards per game. That's first in the OUA, 45.6 points, which is second in the OUA. And a statistic that I wasn't aware of, but I was really impressed by 7 for 8 on third down conversions. That's first in the OUA as well. They're smart when they go for it on third down, and they've got the horses and they've got the play calling in order to do that. So this offense is potent. They can score at will seemingly a lot of times. So that Queens defense is one of the best in the land, no doubt, but they've got their hands full containing these guys.
And it's really going to have to be a game where, on the defensive side of the ball for the Golden Gales and on special teams, and we've certainly seen some special plays made out of a special young man in Ian St. Arnaud this year, for them to really come out with this one. And I feel like there's the capabilities there. But as you mentioned, no Vreeken offensively, last week they were really struggling giving the ball to Anthony Leo. They had Jared Kasari run the ball. His efforts were, still netting them 120 yards on 15 carries. But he, like another running back for the Ottawa Gee-Gees and Charles Asselin, who's been pulling the load for his team, we're seeing him banged up this year. Kasari, we said we don't know about Vreeken. Do we have any update about Jared Kasari? It's a banged up O-line. It's a banged up Kasari, and just goodness gracious, I love that defense. I love the special teams, what Coach Taggart's doing, Coach McManus, all these guys. Obviously, my guy Coach Nez.
Yeah.
But we look at guys like Jared Kasari and that O-line. Have you heard any word about that? And just in general, like, what will they have to do offensively to even get anything going if these guys are down?
So I haven't heard anything officially from the Queen staff. You and I both know that those guys are under lock and key a lot of times. Even after last game, we were talking to Coach Nez and Coach Taggart and saying, "Hey, how's everybody doing? What's the feelings like?" And Coach Taggart goes, "They're part of the press. Don't trust them. We can't tell them anything." So they don't. They are under lock and key. They don't tell us nothing. But from sources around the program, I'm finding that they should be healthy and ready to go. That's Kasari. I think a couple of those O linemen were just on the cusp of that Western game and got told that they're not going. So there's a potential for them to start going here. No, Alex Vreeken still hurts, but if more than anything, even if Vreeken is back, that game plan is still lean on Kasari, lean on that run game, and really try to establish something. Laurier's defense going into this really has struggled at certain times with the run here, but you can't count them out at all. Gorsuch is playing some outstanding football. Chisenham and Senham is a load in that front seven, so it's going to be a tough game. But if they want to win this game, it has to come from the run.
Most certainly. And you know what? We saw last week against the Ottawa Gee-Gees, where a team as well that had been struggling in the passing game had made some changes, going from Josh Jansen Josh Jansen to Ben Miracle, and then back to Josh Jansen, where they had some success with him against Windsor. He looked really good in that game against Ottawa, but it felt like, in that game against Laurier, but it felt like Laurier went in that game saying, okay, look, whether it's Jansen, whether it's Miracle, as a whole, Maxime Melifont's been injured this year for them. Asselin's been injured. It felt like they said, look, if this team's going to beat us, Ottawa that is, it's going to be with King Charles Asselin in the backfield and all the special things that he does, if they bring Kamara in and put him into the slot, and trusting that they have those individuals in the back end on that defense. You mentioned the guys up front that make that run-stopping defense so formidable. But what makes this team so scary is they can look at a team like Queens and say, all right, hey, look, even if you're healthy, we know you want to run the ball. We know that's where you're going to set up your play actions, your deep bombs to your receivers and everything like this. We've seen them have success like that.
Absolutely.
Laurier has the ability to say, okay, we'll load up in the box and give our Malik Cotes, our Jahari Hastings some one-on-one matchups with our guy Harnoor Dhaliwal in the backfield, Ethan Bayfield. These guys have been so formidable for them. That back end for this Laurier defense has been really strong this year, and to the point where I think we do a decent job talking about them, but then folks are like, guys, you're not talking about this Laurier defense enough. They can hurt you on all angles. And we know some of the guys they lost last year, how special is that. You already read it off, but this defense is so special.
Yeah, when you talk about this Laurier defense, you have to start with that. Honestly, we talk about the front seven a lot, but that secondary's been playing outstanding. Our guy in Harnoor Dhaliwal is assimilated into that defense almost from day one, and he's been a stalwart leader from day one for that team, which has been outstanding to see. Malik Cote has been playing some outstanding ball. He had a hell of a game last week against the Ottawa GGs, and Jahari Hastings, as far as I know, is back for them as well. So that defensive secondary is going to be loaded up and ready to go. They are some of the best in the league when they really get things going here. So to have all of those guys back is going to be massive. Once again, I think you nailed it here. That Laurier defense is going into this, especially if Alex Vreekin is out and saying, Kasari is not going to beat us in this day.
Yeah.
We're going to load up against the run. We're going to do everything that we possibly can to limit that awesome run game that Queens has and force them to pass. Anthony Leo in that last game against Western, 10 for 17, 86 yards, but he does have 2 touchdowns on the day. So he was able to find into the end zone. Now, at the end of the second half and maybe in a little bit of garbage time in the fourth quarter, sure, but he did score 2 touchdowns against a very good Western team here. So interested to see how much they get him involved and what kind of play calling Coach Nez is going to load up so that Anthony Leo sees the most success.
And obviously, we've seen Nathan Falcone all year long do great things for these golden Gales. Let me say that again, for these golden Gales.
Golden Gales.
But when I look at the box score, I didn't recognize this at the game live. Didn't see Nico Cuomo on the box score. So again, if he's coming back, whether it's Leo, whether it's Breakin, trying to bolster that receiving crew to give them an opportunity here. Now, let's flip the script. We've kind of mentioned that Queens defense, but let's talk about Laurier offensively. Obviously, it starts with our MVP in Taylor Elgersma coming off of his outstanding year last year. And he's been seemingly nothing but fantastic this year. You gotta love being live. He's seemingly been nothing but fantastic this year, and we know the weapons that he has: the Ethan Jordans, our Leomi Talayos, all these guys, the Tanner Numbs in the backfield. I'm not even coming close to naming them all, but they're on. And you brought this up. We were talking beforehand. This is a team where they get the week 2 bye.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't maybe recognize the significance of that, that means that they're going on game after game after game after game all the way to the playoffs. And as we've seen now with the OUA Championship, the playoff format, one team gets that bye.
Mm-hmm.
Top 7 first gets the bye, the next 6 duke it out to then get into that semi-final performance. And we've seen some emotional games. We've had Battle of Waterloo. We've had Laurier put on that incredible performance against Western a few weeks back. They took out Guelph, what they did against Ottawa. But all the while, we're starting to see Elgersma. He's throwing a few picks in the mix. We've talked about how his emotions have gotten the better of him. And it can all be explained away by just saying these guys have been on such a tough schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Albeit they've stayed home for a lot of those,
sure.
or in the area going down the street to Waterloo.
For sure.
And I'm not saying, because you already read off some of the numbers, that this offense is going to be anything but spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're getting to that point, we're in week 7, 2 more weeks after this one, until we get into the playoffs, until we start to duke it out to raise up that Yates Cup.
Mm-hmm.
It has to start to come to mind of, okay, what does this team have to do right now to get prepared for the playoffs? And part of that, no doubt, means that they have to keep an eye on these purple ponies nipping at their heels, no matter, regardless of the fact they won in the single matchup. Again, it feels like there's some things that we're not loving, and this might be nitpicking. But what are you making of this Laurier offense where we're seeing maybe a few more interceptions, some of those penalties going against their way, and the way they're still just producing game after game?
So, you know what? I'm going to zoom in on this camera right here to talk about this because I'm going into this. This Laurier offense has the capabilities to score and score almost at will anytime they touch the ball here. But we've seen that it's not just one bell cow. Obviously, Ethan Jordan, Raiden Thorne, all of those guys are great, but Leomi Ojatalayo still hasn't had the amount of production that I've come to know that he is capable of. Not through any fault of his own. There's just so many weapons on this team. Everybody seems to be open at any given time, so he doesn't get the ball a ton, but he has the capabilities to break this out. So does Tanner Nelm. So does Raiden Thorne. So does Ethan Jordan. You can go down the list and list. Tayshawn Jackson, Jace Atkinson. They've got weapons all over the field. What I really want to see, we talked about the penalties. Seemingly, they fixed it. 3 penalties for 20 yards last game against Ottawa. Unbelievable. It seems like they fixed it. What I really want to see is I want to see Taylor hold the ball a little bit more. And I want to see him, when I say hold the ball, I mean don't give it away.
Yeah.
He's right now 1,553 yards passing, which is second in the OUA. 8 touchdowns, which is tied for second. But then 7 interceptions, which is also second in the OUA. He's had an uncharacteristic amount of interceptions this year. I'm looking for him to really start to clean that up. And when you look at this, when they get down into the red zone, 85% in the red zone, meaning they're scoring points there, but only 70% in touchdowns, which is ninth in the OUA when you get into the red zone here. However, with that 45.6 points per game, that means they don't need to get into the red zone to score touchdowns. As soon as they get onto the field, they have the capabilities. We saw Tayshawn Jackson take a
Oh
screen,
gosh.
a draw play from close to at the 55 and take it to the house, take it to the crib. You know that they've got the deep threat with all of those receivers that I just mentioned, and Tanner Nelm seemingly can bust it out anytime he wants to. So this team, more than anything, has the capabilities to score anywhere on the field. But the big thing that I want them to focus on, keep those penalties down like you have been, and keep better care of the ball. If you don't give the ball away, you limit all of the capabilities that the other team's offense is able to do, and you take care of business.
Within that, there's so many great things you said there. You're such a beautiful man. But with that, with the red zone efficiency, is we're seeing Dawson Hodge return to the form
Mm-hmm.
that we've obviously known and seen him being able to do in years past, though he might have taken a minor step back last year, just because, again, these different criticisms we're bringing up, that if there's an extra penalty here and there, or if, there's a few more interceptions for Elgersma, at the core point here, it's that if you're a team that's vying for Yates Cups, and again, a year when the OUA is matching up with the AUS, with an
Mm-hmm.
Ontario Kingston date for that Vanier Cup, you have to be firing on all cylinders. Now, let's go back to, again, this matchup with the Queens defense. Because last week, again, we saw when you went up against a defense in the Ottawa GGs where they're so stout in the back end. We've seen this with the eye test. The numbers are backing it up, and they're a little, I don't want to say weaker, but you can really get them on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
If you want
Mm-hmm.
to pick on that defense, you're going to run the ball. And we saw Terran Elms go off for 132 yards on 20 carries and a touchdown. Flip the script now. Because for this Queens defense, they're good on
Mm-hmm.
all sides of the ball. But when we looked at that matchup with them and Western last week, a team who's seemingly fierce on every aspect of the game. We gave Queens the advantage
Mm-hmm.
in the defensive box, in the defensive line, lying back in corn. Guys like Silas Hubert, Darian Newell, Van Wishart, your guy Justin Pace, Liam Sutherland, these guys that make that defense up front so fierce. Of course, not to mention Ian St. Arnaud on the back end, and some of these other guys that make passing on him such a terrible prospect. So when you look at this game for Laurier, do you just come out and you say, we just have to go what our best option is play by play? Or do you think there's a specific angle, kind of how we saw them say, let's run the ball a bit more perhaps against Ottawa, where with this defense with Queens, is there a way you want to attack them? Laurier can do it all
Mm-hmm.
offensively,
Mm-hmm.
and we know they have a great coordinator in Todd Galloway, obviously with head coach Michael Faulds,
Mm-hmm.
his inputs there. What do you see them trying to move? How do you see them trying to move the ball? Is it just going to be best play is what we go with, or are there certain things they're going to want to try and stay away from or lean into?
I think with this Queens defensive secondary, certainly guys like Keegan Vanek and guys like
Keith
Ardu
Bannick, yeah.
and Ashton Miller Melanson, obviously these guys are ball hogs and they get after the quarterback really well. I wouldn't be surprised if Laurier tries to establish the run in this one. I know that sounds shocking with how good Taylor Elgesma has been, but Tanner Nelms has been something of a hidden gem for those guys amongst the list of all of these incredible offensive weapons that they have. I think you really focus on getting Tanner Nelms going. You don't necessarily have to get him to 120 yards rushing like he was, but if you make him a legitimate threat, suddenly play action starts to open up. Suddenly you have Elgesma pulls it, and you have to respect the run that's there, and you have to get Keegan Vanek and Ashton Miller Melanson off their game, even if it's just by a little bit. If those dudes know that it's pass and there's a pass coming, they're some of the best in the league at picking the ball off. So especially against a team or for a team like Laurier that has to take care of the football, not throwing to those guys is probably going to be key in their game plan going into this one. And I think the way that you get them out of that is by getting some solid play action, get Justin Pace, Liam Sutherland, and those linebackers up and try to put it in over the top behind them, but put in front of your defensive secondary. You've got the athletes in behind. As soon as you get them a little bit of space, they're gone. So I think that's going to be something of the game plan here. Obviously, you and I both know Coach Todd Galloway is outstanding at what he does. He's one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. So I know that he's going to have something dialed up for these guys, and I know that Laurier offense is going to be deadly from day one.
Last year we saw these two matchup week 1 at Richardson Stadium in Kingston. It was an 11-10 victory for the Golden Hawks. It was a low offense, beat 'em up type of day. We know that you get some crazy winds going in all directions from Richardson Stadium. Queens, no doubt, is hoping for a similar affair if they're going to
Mhm.
win it. Low scoring, big on the defense, so on and so forth. What outcome do you see in this one today?
When you look into this and you see all of the incredible players that both of these sides have, you start looking at, my God, that defense for Queens has been outstanding. They're averaging right now 394 yards, 247 in the pass, which is actually sixth in the OUA, 147 rush, which is fifth, but 11 interceptions. That's second in the OUA. Like I said, these guys get after the ball and they try to turn it over as often as humanly possible here. And the thing that they do once they have that ball is they score touchdowns. 3 touchdowns on the year so far. That's first in the OUA. So this defense for Queens is outstanding in what they do. It's going to be a tough matchup for Laurier, certainly. But with no Alex Vreekin, I don't trust that Queens offense is going to be scoring enough and as often as they need to. I'm going with the Golden Hawks in this one. They're coming away on senior day with the win.
I'm right there with you. I'm going Golden Hawks at home. And again, it's such a tough schedule for them that you're at home and then you go on the road to take on Windsor the following week. And then you go to Carleton the week after that. And again, this is a team that seriously is needing to finish out this season undefeated. I mean, if you lose one, at least you have the tie break with Western. If they don't falter again with those two key road games where you're going from one end of the 401 all the way to the other
Mhm.
against teams, one of which might also be undefeated in Windsor. We'll get to that game shortly. And a team in Carleton that might be fighting for their playoff lives take care of home against a beat up Queens team, do all those things we were mentioning. But I think it'll be a hell of a ball game. I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I love, again, all the institutional strength that Queens has, that defense. And you know what? It was brought to our attention in the Western. I'm really going to have my eyes on 99 more than I normally do. And Silas Hubert mentioned that he's still dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury there. So I'm going to be interested to see how Laurier attacks him. And you know what? These are two intense teams. They get fired up. I'm just hoping that 99 and 13 don't end up throwing throwing fists at one another because I can see that happening. However it breaks down, I think it'll be a stellar game. So let's move off of that one into our next 1 o'clock game. We're going from Laurier to the 6 for York's homecoming, hosting the Waterloo Warriors. This is a game that we had highlighted in our preseason matchup, both as two teams that York we had along with U of T in that bottom tier, the winning isn't everything tier. Waterloo we had a notch above. I think if we were to reconfigure our tiers, probably would have had them in the same area.
Yep.
Waterloo, obviously, last year we saw with a really strong running game. We saw with Nick Orr come alive at that quarterback position. But the reason beyond that we had highlighted these two teams is both of them bringing in new defensive coordinators, both of whom have duked it out in this field many a times with you and me in the pads on, in Coach Kevin McNeil, defensive coordinator for Waterloo, and your guy, Coach Greg Knox, for the York Lions. This is a game where, for both these clubs, Waterloo's yet to pick up a win on the season. York's looking to earn that second stripe. Head coach Dexter Janke, the other major change, the majorest of major change they made this year, bringing him in. We got to be up close with them, see how that culture is taking root. By all accounts, he's the right guy to turn this team around. Picking up that second win would go a long way for it. What do you make of these two clubs both sort of trying to earn their stripes quite literally with York, with how Dexter Janke's told them that you don't get decals until we win a couple of games, and Waterloo having shown some positive things this year, a great opening game against U of T, a really hard-fought loss in the Battle of Waterloo against the Golden Hawks, and just trying to salvage something of this season going into the Lions' Den for York's homecoming.
When you look at both of these squads, and I'm going to start with the Waterloo Warriors to begin here. When we saw them in the first couple of weeks, certainly they had that really tight and exciting game against the U of T Blues, and then obviously the next week they play against these Western Mustangs here, and obviously that's 71-0 outing. And I think Coach Greg Marshall getting a little bit of revenge on Coach McNeil for leaving them in that regard. Wouldn't be surprised at that, but. When we first saw that, you and I are looking at each other going, I don't know if Waterloo's going to be there this year. I don't know what's happening. And then they come out and they go in the Battle of Waterloo, and they have an outstanding game against Laurier, and they pick Taylor Elgismo off 3 times in that one, and they do some great stuff. And then last game, they play against your Guelph Griffins, my Guelph Griffins,
Everyone's Guelph Griffins,
and they're 15-3. in halfway through the second quarter.
Yeah.
And you and I are looking like, look at the production that's here, look at the movement that's here. So yes, right now Waterloo does not have a win on the season. I don't think that they are as I don't think they're struggling as much in
Great
this
pivot.
regard. Yeah, thank you. I know you know I was going with that. I don't think they're struggling as much in this one. I think they're actually starting to come together a little bit more. Now it might be a little too late for this season, but there's a lot of really positives that I'm liking to see here. Anthony Miller so far has been really something of a stalwart in being that bell cow for them, not going outstanding numbers by any means, but it's solid for them. Hand the ball off, gain some solid yards, have a manageable second down for your quarterbacks to really go and rip it. Now, obviously, Nick Orr not in for this game. He looks like potentially there's some hope he might be in for the last game of the season, but 100% he's out for this one. So you will see Nolan Caban do his thing. And then last week, he did pretty well against the Guelph Griffins 24 for 36, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, he does have 2 interceptions on that, but he was really doing his thing and really looked impressive, especially for a young man who hasn't been starting the entire year here. So I liked what I saw from Waterloo. Obviously, we think that Coach McNeil is finally getting his claws into that defense and they're finally starting to play how we expect them to, especially how they played against Laurier and against Guelph. So don't sleep on these Warriors. They have the capabilities to pull some close games out, and they just might going into the last part of the season here.
And Nolan Caban, we saw him come in with Nick Orr 2 years ago, 2022, or maybe it was 21. I can't remember exactly. And it looked like Caban won the starting spot. You had two rookies come in. And you also had Matt Lynn with that team as well, the guy who's going to be starting for the York Lions as far as we're concerned. Shout out to our guy Sean Law, though, of course. Um, but you have these two guys who've been duking it out. Nolan Caban wins it in that first year. And you mentioned he gets the 2 touchdowns, he throws the 2 interceptions. That was seemingly his MO that year, was they still had a guy in Gordon Lamb, and they still had James Basiliga and Justin Sukar. A lot of these remnants from the Trey Ford era with these Waterloo Warriors, one of the most explosive, dynamic offenses you sports have ever seen in the history books. And so I think it makes sense that in many ways you say, hey, look, it's a young kid here, clearly has a big arm. We realize that we can't just let these horses be in the stables and just say, oh, it's a young rookie quarterback. We can't throw it. So he certainly, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It was certainly boom or bust, where he was either getting big touchdowns to Basiliga, to Gordon Lamb, Justin Sukar, all these guys, but throwing a lot of picks. But that gunslinger mentality, they switch over to Nick, or that run game comes alive last year. You mentioned Anthony Miller, Quentin Springer in his rookie year last year, looking fantastic. You get that thunder and lightning out of Miller and Springer. And or can more just be that game manager type. And last year, of course, they still had James Basiliga. They still had Justin Sukar. This year, of course, they lose some of those weapons. They bring back a lot of people on that O-line, including Kalra, who's an absolute beast up front.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, hey, look, another year for Nick Orr. They're going to run the ball really well. They're going to let Nick Orr start to evolve his game. And that UFT game, as you highlight, we really started to see it. And then it fell off. And obviously, when you face Western, that's bound to happen a little bit. They do that to everyone. They've done actually they've done it to us. They do it. Well, we'll talk about that later. We'll get back to games that you've had here. No, but so to see Nick Orr go out, to see Caban come back in, you're right. They're showing really special things in here. But again, it's seeing a young team trying to find its identity. And it felt like last year, whether they were having the utmost success. I mean, they beat Guelph last year. They put up a formidable performance this year. They're in a tight game against Mac last year. Waterloo was looking really sharp. I feel like we haven't quite found that identity for them on the offensive side of the ball with Caban moving in. It makes it that much more tough. But you bring up what Coach McNeil's doing with his defense there. The pressures he's bringing, these will half fires from the backside, using their safety in Anesu Latmore, getting to the quarterback probably better than any defensive back is in the league. And I expect nothing but that to continue in this game, because we've certainly seen when some of the truly dominant defenses in the league, a la what Windsor did in that York game, and how they were able to bring some pressure and really slow down York offensively. How do you see now? Let's pivot over to the York Lions. Got a young guy in Matt Lynn. They got Avante McCoy, who's kind of the Swiss Army knife for them. Melkus Alunga. Probably still no Alfred Olay. Is just my hunch, my suspicion, seeing him on crutches, that UFT game battle, Toronto Red Blue Bowl, Argo Cup, Matt Dean's Bowl. From what you've been seeing, because this is a team that was tied with the Carleton Ravens at half last week. How do you see them trying to deal with a team that's going to bring a lot of pressure?
It's difficult to say for these York Lions because once again, I don't think that we've actually found what their strength is on offense, what their bread and butter is, and really leaning on that. I mean, Melkus Alunga really hasn't been getting the same amount of production that we know that he's capable of. In the last game against Carleton, he's got 12 attempts, so they're attempting to, but only 33 yards. So really not being able to establish the run in this one. Matt Lynn on the year so far, 73 for 133, 818 yards passing, one touchdown to seven interceptions. So they're really not getting a ton of production in the air on offense at all right now. 1,155 yards of total offense so far, 844 passing yards, 406 rushing yards. That's all last in the OUA in offensive production here. So really not seeing the level of uh, how am I trying to word this? The level of production that we know that are from these individual players.
Mm.
We know that Avante McCoy is outstanding. In that last game, 8 catches for 97 yards. Alfred Olay, when he's healthy, is obviously another great aspect of this as well. But this offense really has been struggling. I haven't really seen a ton that would make me say, yeah, you know what? I'm confident at how things are going. I'm confident they can do this. I just don't know. They've had obviously awesome guys. They were able to get out that big win in the Argo Cup, the Red Blue Bowl, the Matt Dean's Bowl, but nothing in there that really said this offense from a
Yeah.
schematic standpoint is really doing their thing rather than Avante McCoy and Alfred Olay are just outstanding. Well, Avante McCoy in particular in that game, outstanding at what he does. So I really don't know what to think of this York Lions offense. You and I have been talking about the potential that's there all year, and I still think that the potential is there, but we just haven't seen anything consistently for me to say, yes, this is what York's going to get to. This is how they're going to do things. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah. And you know what? For York, we've obviously seen a few instances of them using that screen game really effectively. Going back to that outing they had against Queens, which was their most explosive, I guess,
hmm
outing they
hmm
had offensively. Olay's still in that, but getting the ball out quick. Obviously, a team like Queens, you can't be holding on to the ball for a long
No.
time, and you're dealing with a Waterloo defense, as we already highlighted, and we'll probably perhaps go through it in more detail.
hmm
Is going to bring pressure. You don't want to hold on to the rock. But again, we talked about that this was a matchup that came to our attention because of these two new defensive coordinators,
hmm
one in Kevin McNeil, but the other in Coach Greg Knox, your guy, Foxy Knoxy,
hmm
part of so many of those outstanding teams and championship teams here with your McMaster Marauders at Ron Joyce Stadium. And again, a system that likes to have you thinking a lot. And we always just say this at Guelph that the more you're thinking pre snap, the less you're firing out and making your blocks from the offensive line perspective. Throwing some odd fronts, maybe just two down linemen, a bunch of linebackers, and other
hmm
D
hmm
lineman bodies kind of just floating around. You don't know who's coming, who's dropping. And included into the mix of a great scheme is we're starting to now see guys like Brody Clark
Yes.
and Peyton Ryder really become dudes in the OUA. From our having conversations with other players, it's always those point of concern of, well, someone's got to make tackles for these teams. Is it just a function of like these are the guys on cleanup crew? No, without a doubt, and especially looking at number 28 and Brody Clark, this guy's flying all over the ball. We already detailed it last week. We got confirmation he's playing that Sam linebacker position, so he's got to be that Swiss Army knife for them defensively, and especially. And I'll put you on the spot a bit if you can remember
Ooh.
some of the Sam linebackers that you played with during your time at
Oh,
Mac to be able to talk about how important having a versatile athlete who's obviously a sound tackler, as we know Clark is, into the mix. Because that's obviously it's one thing to have a great scheme, like McNeil as when we talked about how a guy like Anesu Latmer and they still
mhm.
got a Hinsberger in the mix there. As long as there's a Hinsberger in Waterloo, they'll be doing some good things. We have a few guys in there who have started to earn their stripes metaphorically for these
Mhm.
York Lions within Knox's system. Brody Clark certainly being one, but you have familiarity more than either of us with this defense of how Knox does this thing. What
Mhm.
are you making of what they're showing on that side of the ball?
Well, you know, during my time when I was playing at McMaster, the guy who was at the center point where Brody Clark was Nick Shorthill.
Oh crap!
And he was President's Trophy winner, one of the best defensive players that I have ever seen. So yeah, he was a little bit good at football when he was doing his thing. So yeah, really saw Knox be able to lean on the outstanding players that he had when we were with McMaster here. I mean, not to get into Mac too much, but when talking about this defense in 2011, three linebackers who started in 2011, all three were either current or going to be President's Trophies winners in Ryan Chmielewski, Aram Isho, and in Nick Shorthill. So he had some outstanding players to work with here. Now he's got some really great guys on this defense. Brody Clark, like you mentioned, has been doing outstanding work for York. He doesn't have the same caliber, not yet. He doesn't have a Joey Capito and Mike Daly in the backfield calling out things and getting as many picks as those guys did. But they're building towards something. They're building towards getting to where they want to be. York right now averaging 432 yards on defense, which is 10th in the OUA, 275 passing yards, 157 rushing yards, 2 sacks and 2 interceptions so far this year. So not crazy numbers that jump off the page, but I've seen a lot of this York Lions defense, a real bend but don't break. There's a lot of teams that have been able to move the ball on them certainly and score touchdowns in certain places. But there hasn't been one game where we've gone, oh, York got blown out in this one, like we saw all last year. So the leaps and bounds and improvements that they have made has been staggering for sure, but they're still not where they want to be, obviously. That York Lions defense under coach Greg Knox, I have a ton of confidence in, and I know that as the year goes on, certainly as the years go on, they're going to get better and better and better as things go. So a tough defense, an outstanding defensive coordinator. I don't know if all the pieces are there just quite yet, but don't sleep on this York Lions defense. It is outstanding. It is absolutely, I should say, the golden part of that York Lions team, both offense, defense, and special teams, is that York Lions defense. It's the best part, and they're really going to showcase what they're able to do against this Waterloo squad. I can tell you that.
And it's really coming down to from our conversation here that these defenses are really going to control the tempo of the game for both these squads. For Waterloo, another key name that's been having a stellar year is Michael Omaseni in the
Yes.
middle. He obviously had those 2 interceptions against Taylor Elgosma in the Battle of Waterloo. He's been all over the place. He's been doing some great things for them in the middle with great defensive performances. Bring up a lot of opportunities to have to punt the ball. And you know what? We don't often get to talk about it, but it's a hell of a matchup of two punters in Rex Walker for the York Lions and for our guy in Cole Crossett for the Waterloo Warriors. So winning field position, having explosive play in the special teams unit is certainly going to make the difference. Tom, anything else you have on this one before we get into our picks? Certainly, I'm excited to see how with Coach Janke that being this culture setter,
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that for homecoming that he might sort of pull out of the hat in terms of making things. Or pardon me, I said Rex Walker, I meant Nathan Walker.
There
My
you go.
apologies.
There you go. We're
Terribly
good.
sorry.
We're good.
Shout out to the Walkers. Met both mom and dad at the Battle of Toronto the other week. Um, I'm excited to see what Coach Janke kind of pulls out of the hat to make homecoming such a special affair
Mm-hmm.
for them. Aside from that, again, tough defenses, offenses still trying to find themselves, and some great punter kickers on these teams. Any last notes on this one?
Yeah, when you look into this and you start looking at the Waterloo Warriors, I love the fact that you brought up the receivers that were previously a part of this squad in the Basiligas and the Lambs and everything. The person that I was surprised to see in that last game against Guelph was Logan Haru. Logan Haru finishes that game 5 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown. A solid outing against a very good Guelph Griffins defense, and especially a renewed defense in that game. So love to see what he was doing in that one. Nolan Caban really surprised me, and we already went through the numbers against Guelph. So I'm looking to see if he can reproduce some of the offensive production that he saw there. Shout out to our guy, Coach Brendan Conway. He's really been doing his thing, regardless of the pieces that are in there. It's most definitely. But going into this game, and I'm going to get into my pick here, I think of all of the teams that are there, offense, defense, and special teams for both sides. I think the team that's going to perform the best is that York defense. I think they're going to limit everything that they're capable of doing for that Waterloo offense and really going to put them into some tough scenarios and get some field position. And York Lions, I know that I was really iffy on that offense, but I like Avante McCoy a lot. I think Melkus Alunga has the capabilities to do so as well. If Matt Lynn just can get the ball into his guys' hands with a bit of space, I think they can get the job done. I'm going with the York Lions to get the lion on the side of their helmet in this one.
I'm right there with you on the pick. I'm taking York at home. As you said, that defense for them is perhaps the most sturdy unit we can look at thus far in this game. And that offense for Waterloo, we're starting to see some good things. We're seeing bits and pieces. But the piece on going to Nolan Caban, who is obviously someone who has been a formidable quarterback at times, but getting that consistency, we obviously talked about when he was in the mix, it was with some of those receivers from that past generation trying to get into the flow. He did a good job of that
Mm-hmm.
against Guelph. But as far as what we've seen consistent, we're seeing more consistency out of York thus far this year. I'm going with the Lions on their homecoming. Now, Tom, Before we get into the other game, again, we are here at Max Homecoming. You might be able to pick up the band from the tailgate happening sort of off to our right. You're seeing the players warm up here. The stands haven't filled up yet, but behind where the cameras are, you're seeing all sorts of folks, students in the full Marauder gear and the community coming out in full force. And obviously, Homecoming, we'll get into this game in specific, but Max also doing some promotional material, raising money as well in this one for the local food bank.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. McMaster is partnering with Purelator for tackling hunger. In this past week, maybe 2 weeks so far, they've raised a few $1,000s to go into this hunger program, and a ton of non-perishable food items to get going into that as well. I don't have the exact numbers on me whatsoever, but previously, before we set up, there was an outstanding photo op that happened here with a ton of food with some of the players that they were able to corral here. So one of the other outstanding parts of Homecoming, getting some awareness around giving back to the community in that standpoint, and I'm proud of McMaster for doing that.
No, it's a great job by them. Earlier on, they had a QR code on the big screen so you could scan and make a contribution. So for those coming to the game, make sure to keep your eyes peeled for that. It's obviously going to a great cause. So shout out to McMaster Marauders and everyone here putting together this whole event today. But we move from this end of the Highway 6 to the other end where we have the Guelph Griffins, my Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins taking on the Windsor Lancers, leaving the comfort of the blue collar gold swagger under the shadow of the golden arches. Coach Don Cercelli bringing his team from one alumni stadium to the other. And I'm kidding about the blue collar gold swagger because that travels.
That
baby.
travels everywhere.
That travels everywhere. We have them rolling into Guelph, a matchup where Windsor right now 5-0, taking on a Guelph team that has been offensively one of the best teams in the league thus far this year. Defensively, we've seen some spots here where teams have burned them a bit, and we're starting to see it really come together again. We've talked about new faces with organizations, a lot of the same players back there, but we're seeing a new DC there for this team. So learning that system. But it's hard to not look at this game. And for me, is well, no, we're both Guelph Griffins in the house, except today I won't say it too loud for your sake because of where we are. But as the Guelph Griffin in the house, to not look at the last 2 years of matchups in the way that Windsor, we've obviously seen how defensively that's where they've become as good as anyone in the country, but they've been as good at running the ball as well as anyone in the country. And I don't have both games, but we go back 2 years ago when Windsor really came onto the scene, 2022. They go into Guelph, I think it was week 2 or week 3, and it was the Joey Zorn coming out party. Rushes for over 100. It's a close game, a battle, nip and tuck towards the end. I can't remember. It might have gone to overtime, but I think it came down right to the wire.
Down to the wire, at least.
And it was really the moment where not only Joey Zorn stepped on the scene and said, I am Joey Zorn from Flint, Michigan, hear me roar, but also for teams being like, oh, shoot, okay, Windsor looks legit. Then last year, Guelph goes to the end of the 401 under the shadow of the Golden Arches in the house of Coach Don Cercelli. And Windsor puts up 488 yards rushing on them. They score 41 points, holding Guelph to 18. Now, Guelph obviously last year, like they are this year, used the 2 young quarterbacks in Marshall McCray and Tristan Abood. And Donovan Malloy was able to have a nice game on the ground for himself, picking up 114. But that 3-headed, really 4-headed beast of a running backfield for Windsor was just having their way with Guelph in that one. Again, in the 2023 matchup from Alumni Stadium in Windsor, Wavy Mambo runs for 130, Joey Zorn runs for 111, Christopher John rushes for 81 and a touchdown, and Liam Talbot rushes for 80 and 1 touchdown. This Guelph defense has gotten better. We've seen that in no other way than the way they handled that Laurier team who put a beat down on them last year. But that's where my eyes go first in this matchup, is just looking at how dominant Windsor's been on the ground against this Guelph team over the past 2 years, and just in my heart of hearts, trying to reconcile what I've been seeing this year, what we've been seeing with an improved defense, but just not getting those demons out of my head. What do you make of this matchup from the jump?
So I love that you brought that up, and I will absolutely get into that spot. But I want to go to this camera here for a bit of breaking news as we were talking here. We just finished up on the York Waterloo game, but as we were talking, I got some breaking news on my phone. our guy, Sean Lawless, the starting quarterback
Oh,
for York
oh,
Lions. He
oh,
is going to be
goody.
starting in this game against the Waterloo
Really?
Warriors. So we're going to see our guy in doing that. So I wanted to call that out just before I got into
That's
everything.
outstanding. Go Sean Law. I love
Go
it.
Sean Law.
Yeah.
So awesome to see for the York Lions. To go back into this one and against that the Windsor Guelph game, most definitely. Windsor had their way on the ground last year. It was a bit of a rough showing for our Guelph Griffins into that one. But this is a different team. This is a completely different matchup going into this year, most definitely. But that Windsor offense has been truly outstanding. 1,964 yards total offense right now, 906 in the past. That's 10th in the OUA, but 1,130 yards rushing. That's second in the OUA. That right behind that three-headed monster, like we were talking about, into this one. 145 points so far, absolutely outstanding. However,
However,
3 for 11 on third down, 27% in third down conversions. Now, obviously, you hope that you never have to get into third down, but that's a surprising statistic, especially on third down when typically it's going to be a close one. So you lean on your running backs, and there's arguably nobody who has better running backs than Windsor. But to not get that, I thought that was a little interesting. 92% conversion in the red zone.
hmm.
They get points when they're in the red zone, certainly 75% in touchdowns. That's second in the OUA for that percentage there. They are outstanding when they get down there. They're very highly efficient when they're in there as well. So I like this Windsor offense a lot, especially that run game. Breaking news once again into this one as well for folks that don't know. We talked about personnel at York. No Danny Skelton. He's not even dressing for the Windsor Lancers in this one. Corson Roy is listed as the starter on the program. I would not be surprised to see Nick Demovsky get the start in this one. Certainly, we saw at the end of the U of T game, Demovsky was going off. He had the best showcase. Now, you could say maybe that was in garbage time. It was close to the end of the game and a game that was already out of reach for the U of T Blues, but still, he had the best showing for the three quarterbacks that were in on that. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of Nick Demovsky in this one to really try to get that pass game going. And no Braden McDougall for the Guelph Griffins in this one. So that's a big loss to the defense and the linebacking core. However, for Windsor, I know there's a lot of personnel here.
Pickets.
There's a lot of things going on here. There is no Liam Talbot. He is not dressed in this game. That is a massive blow to that offense, but Jafoni Cunningham is back. So lots of personnel changes in this one. Lots of big news to go along with that. What do you think is the biggest opportunity there with all of those guys that I mentioned that aren't dressing in this one?
Well, number one, anytime we talk about Braden McDougall, if it's a Windsor and Guelph matchup, I always have to make sure I'm hearing the name right, that we're talking about Braden McDougall for Guelph and not Brenton McDougall
Yeah.
for Windsor. Okay, so it's on the Guelph side thing, so I don't love that. You mentioned Liam Talbot out, Javoni Cunningham, obviously not just as a threat in the receiving game, but what he can do as one of the best returners in the nation. My question is, you're coming in hot with all this news, is do we know Wade Mambo's status? Because if that four-headed beast has become now just the Christopher John and Joey Zorn show, hey, number one, I'll still buy front row seats to that show, but it's certainly not quite what you get with all four of those. Do we know about Wade Mambo yet?
Wagme Mambo out for this game, not
Okay.
dressing.
That's a bad beat. You know what? You were giving shout outs there. I gotta realize, this is on me right here. We didn't shout out our beautiful friends here in Royal Media. making this happen.
Yes, the
So
guys
my
behind the
apologies to
camera.
Manny and Alex. Again, from the jump, I realized I messed up on that one. So, we're thinking about the Royal City right now. I was thinking about Royal Media, right? It goes hand in glove right there, Ooh, football. What's going on, big dog? Yeah, from that standpoint, I'm really looking to see now whether it's Corson Roy or Nick Demovsky looks to do in the passing attack. Because number one, we don't know Wavy Mambo's status. He went out in that game against York, and that's a few weeks ago. Don't know what the full status of it was, but if that's a full year injury, obviously that just breaks my heart. But if they, that rushing attack, we still have faith that can be good. We keep coming back to this theme with them of figuring out who are your guys, who's your guy you're going to lean on the passing game. Because if you're going to be a team that wants to make a run into the depths of November, into perhaps playing in that game from Richardson Stadium in Kingston, we need to know that you can attack teams on both sides. Like in my estimations, because you mentioned that red zone efficiency, and they have a guy in Brady Litster kicking the ball who's doing a heck of a job so far this year for them. He's one of the best we have in the province. And when you can run the ball as well as they can, when your defense is as stout as they've been, there is the part of me, I think it's that offensive lineman in me that says, a great running game and a great defense. Let's go. You don't need anything else. Who needs to pass the ball? We'll hand it off 50, 60 times in the game. But as we were kind of as it was brought to our attention last, a Windsor team who some folks, particularly some folks in the London area, are questioning just the caliber of competition they've had to go up
Absolutely.
against. Now, obviously, that includes a team in the Queen's Gold and Gales earlier this year. But I'm a firm believer that they're gonna have to get this passing game going. Figure out who the guy is. The notion of it being Nick Domofsky obviously is a nice story because he's an Essex Raven
Mm-hmm.
from the area himself. So the idea of him becoming the starting quarterback, winning that position, and leading them on a Yates Cup and maybe further is just a beautiful storyline. But with Javoni Cunningham coming back into the mix, we've obviously seen what some of the other pass catchers for this team have been able to do for them. I'm trying to pull up the names in front of me because it's escaped me right now. But the Jalen Millers, the
Mm-hmm.
Colby Gins, Shane Johnsons of the world, they have the horses there. Have to see it start getting ready. But with how they've run against Guelph, I don't know. Maybe you just come to this game and say we know we can have success there, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's Joey Zorn and Christopher John.
Yeah, I actually, when you're looking at this game, obviously there's a few guys that are out for this Windsor offense. I actually like the fact that Danny Skelton is not dressed in this one. Not
Mm,
because Danny Skelton is a bad player by any means. I think that he's really great. But anytime he's been in there, there's been a lot of times where quarterbacks have been subbed in and out pretty constantly. Skelton's in there doing his thing. He gets subbed out for Corson Roy. Corson Roy gets subbed out for Nick Demovsky in the last game. There's been a lot of changeover at quarterback here, which you and I both know as an offensive lineman, that can mess up a lot of things in that as well, even for something as simple as just a play calling, how you're calling the cadence. Some guys like to hold on down set hut, and that can mess up guys that are leaning in their stands expecting a hut to come or something along those lines. So I think having a little bit more consistency at quarterback, which I think they're going to aim for going into this game, is going to be wonders for the Windsor Lancers. If Nick Demovsky is the guy, we've seen he has the capabilities to really throw the ball. We don't know why he hasn't been in that mix previously. Maybe he had an injury. Maybe Corson Roy did just win the number 2 spot, but having him back in there, we've seen the capabilities that he's able to do last year as well. I like that a lot. And even once again, we talk about the running game. Wegby Mumble being out is a massive blow no matter what because he's had multiple different positions, not only playing the running back, he was also a fullback for them as well, doing his thing in that one. But having just a couple of guys in Christopher John and in Joey Zorn to really allow them to get a rhythm going and to establish the run game and to really get things going, I think could help them in the long run as well. Because so many times you want to give it to the guy who has a hot hand, and suddenly if Joey Zorn rips off a huge 20-yard gain and then he gets pulled out and you bring somebody else in, then okay, now we're going to put Christopher John in there. Actually, Christopher John, you're going to go to the fullback, and now we're going to put Wegby Mumble in there. And now that you have those guys out, actually, we're going to go to Liam Talbot because he can come into the backfield and do a jet play or even come in as a regular running back. So there's a lot of people who are committee there, and I don't think that there's any resentment on any of those guys for sure. But if Joey Zorn is ripping off and really doing his thing, in the last game we saw him 12 attempts, 121 yards, 2 catches for 10 yards, really be a part of that offense. And now you allow him to get a rhythm going. Now you allow him to really start to establish himself and play some outstanding football. I think that this could really help benefit the Windsor Lancers in the long run in that offense and getting that rhythm going and finding their identity finally.
Yeah, and obviously on the other side of the ball for those Guelph Griffins, trying to
Mm-hmm.
slow down that offense on the ground or in the run. Now you mentioned no McDougal, but we know they got our guy in Anthony Mortuzo. They got a guy in Javon Jacobson, obviously Brandon Ferrigo, Eunice Larry, Jack Cobb. Really a very strong
Mm-hmm.
linebacking core that I think has been a very pleasant surprise. Obviously, when we saw Tuzo being back and healthy, that was going to be a huge moment for us. Javon Jacobson being healthy again. It's a Rockets affair going on here in the background here. We know how strong this defense is going to be, even if there's no McDougal for them to have slow this team down. Obviously, on the front end, you got Wood Manzi, you got some of these other guys that are really strong. In terms of this Guelph defense with no McDougal, from what we've seen from them, these multiple packages, the way that Windsor is now a bit limited, as we've seen. Now, not as many of the running backs, not as much of that versatility, where as you've been clamoring for all year, we've started to get where you put Joey Zorn out into the slot and you start to mess around with, Wavy Mambo in a kind of fullback position and so on and so forth. Does that give Guelph the ability to say, okay, we lost one of our key players, McDougal, for this one? Do we just say, look, who are our best 12 to be out here to handle these monsters coming from the end of the 401 and slow them down? And if so, who's someone, obviously Josh Campbell, another guy in the middle, who's going to be huge for them in slowing them down that you feel is going to, how do you feel they're going to have to try and slow this team down? Is it going to be the same principle of saying, look, whether it's Roy or Domofsky, it's young quarterbacks, force them to beat us in the air and just don't let this team rush for 488 yards again.
I don't think there's any way that we see Windsor get the same amount of rushing going into this game. I think that this Guelph Griffin defense is much more improved. However, they still have the capability to maybe go for 200 yards or something along those lines because they're so good on the ground. I think you listed off some outstanding players, obviously. Jack Cobb, our guy, and Anthony Moore. Tuzo! Outstanding linebacker play for sure. Eunice Larry doing his thing as well. The big piece that this Guelph Griffin team is going to need is from that D line. Josh Campbell and Curtis Woodmansey are going to have the games of their lives to stop this running game before it really gets going here. We've seen that Windsor offensive line last year lose a lot of really key players, including a guy like George Una, who's gone to the CFL as well. Now, obviously, they still have some great guys in there, but I don't think that's the same quality of offensive line that we saw from last year as well. I'm expecting those guys to have another great game. Nick Parchenko as well as the defensive end. He's really bulked up. He's a strong dude, crashing down on those tackles to really try to go after an Owen Mueller, who is back for the Windsor Lancers as well. I think this D-line is really going to have to stand on their head in order to stop the run before it gets going here. Because if Joey Zorn and Christopher John get past the D-line into the linebackers, sure, those linebackers are good enough to make those tackles, but they're getting punishment because Joey Zorn, especially Christopher John, loves to put his head down and make sure you pay for trying to tackle him in that regard. So I'm really hoping that this Griffin defensive line can come to play in this one.
And I believe Morkin's back on that O-line as well for
Jackson
that
Morkin
Windsor,
is back.
for that Windsor O-line. Now, if we're talking O-lines, though, they might be the best, but if it's not them, there's a good chance it's those Guelph Griffins with all these
Damn
dudes
straight.
that you recruited and coached for them. And that's helped them establish such a strong running game all year long. Obviously, what we've seen from Tristan Aboud and Marshall McCray at quarterback has been stellar. And you've mentioned some of the players that are in and out in this one. I believe you have another announcement as far as someone on the offensive side of the ball, another Swiss Army knife of sorts for Guelph is going to be suiting up in this one.
When you look at this one, and we talked about how important that passing game is to them, and we really wanted to establish it, we saw Vashon Janusis really get going. Kane Stevenson is back for the Guelph Griffins. He's going to be lining up and starting for them as well. I don't know if he's 100% or if he's just able to dress, but getting that guy going in the passing game brings a completely other aspect to this vision as well in this Griffin offense. I got a chance to watch him in those CFL draft combines and that regional combine that I was at. He's too big and too strong for the linebackers to blitz on, but he's also fast enough that he can compete with some of the DBs that are there. And I really, really like what I saw from this young man. If he can stay healthy in this game, he's going to be such a massive asset to them. But I don't know how much he's really going to be able to go, if they're going to limit him or not. But Kane Stevenson being back is massive for this Griffin offense.
And they're going to need all hands on deck because
Absolutely.
as scary as that offense and that run game is in specific for Windsor, it's this defense that gives people nightmares with what Coach Patrick Donovan's been doing all year long. We saw them get 7 sacks last week against the U of T Blues, and obviously this Guelph O-line is a much different type of caliber than what U of T's trotting now. It is what it is. It's not a shot at them one way or the other. But with guys like Claudia Mooson, Liam Hoskins, Devin Versa, Ethan John, Bobby Springer in the backfield, picking off balls left, right, and center, it becomes such a Herculean task to try and move the ball on this team. Seemingly no one's had success doing it. They're holding teams to less than 100 yards on the ground. It's ridiculous what they're doing. We've seen Donovan Malloy really get going this year. He had that massive run against Queens to keep Guelph in that one. We've seen, obviously, what with Isaiah Smith and him yet to really get going for them on that end as well. And we're seeing some other guys really mix in nicely with this run game. Marshall McCray giving them that dual threat quarterback, and Aboud seeing getting better and better week after week. This defense is stout. And I didn't even mention guys like Esteban Acebo, Jason Rashatzi. It's ridiculous. It keeps going. With how Guelph can move the ball in all facets of the game and how Windsor can stop you in all facets. If you are dialing up this offense, if you are a head coach and offensive coordinator, Mark Soria, trying to leave your mark in this one and pick up a major win at home with Windsor coming to your crib, what's your game plan offensively to try and get something going against Windsor that has allowed seemingly nothing all year?
Well, certainly, and I'm going to this camera for this one because I'm really getting into this. Certainly for this one, they're going to be leaning on that Griffin offensive line. We've been mentioning it. They are one of, if not the best unit in the OUA right now in terms of what they're able to do. So leaning on them against this stout Windsor D line is definitely going to be a part of that game plan going into this. I think when you look at all of the capabilities that this Griffin defense can really do, or excuse me, this Windsor defense can really do, remember, Sal Rapkopya is not going to be in this one. He has compound fracture. He got injured in that last game against U of T. Well, I'm expecting Jason Rashatzi to be the new guy starting in that position here, who has been outstanding for sure. But I wouldn't be surprised if Guelph tries to go after him in this one and really tries to test, are you that guy for this Windsor defense that's going to be able to compete in this one? So I'm interested to see what they're going to be going after here. Obviously, Rashawn Janusis is a threat. Anytime he touches the ball, in the last game, he goes 6 catches for 102 yards, but close to 300 yards of total offense in that one, including the special teams. So he's dangerous anytime he touches the ball. But when you have guys in that defensive secondary as well who are playing lights out to go into this one, to give you a little bit into this, Windsor, 59 point. They're giving up 59 points, 260 yards in the rush, 162 in the pass. The pass is second. 98 yards in rushing, 18 sacks, all of it first in the OUA in terms of the capabilities that they have. So that Windsor defense is playing lights out football, and going into this one, they are outstanding in what they do. It's going to be a tough game for that Guelph Griffin offense.
With that said, Tom, we're here. It's hitting noon o'clock. We're an hour away from kickoff, and we still have a Panda game and this matchup to break down. Do you have anything left in your notes, or is it time to pick them here?
Oh, I think it's time to pick them. Since 2010,
oh gosh,
this is 6-5 for Guelph winning in these. But Windsor has won the last 3 in this game from 2021 onwards. The Griffins have not beat them since the pandemic in this one here. So when you look at all of those different things, Tristan Aboud and Marshall McRae have really been doing their thing in this one, certainly as well. Tristan Aboud is 91 for 138, 1,222 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions as well. We've seen a marked improvement in how well he's been able to move the ball and his decision making, getting the ball down the field and finding his guys who are open. But I'm going with the Windsor Lancers in this one. That defense has been outstanding all year long. Absolutely. Number 1 in all categories except for pass. And they're number 2 in that one as well. They're playing lights out. And I actually think we're going to see more production out of this Windsor offense in the quarterback play. Not because Guelph was weak by any means, but because I think that Nick Demovsky or Corson Roy have the capabilities to move the ball down the field. This running attack of Joey Zorn and Christopher John, it's just going to be a little too much for Guelph. Windsor takes this one.
And you know what? I hear everything you're saying, and it makes all the sense in the world. And frankly, maybe it makes more sense than my pick. But I'm going with Guelph at home. I'm having them take out these big bad Lancers. Again, we have an offense that's been so effective on all aspects of the game, an offensive line that's been as good as anyone else in the way they can scheme and use some of these big running backs. Isaiah Smith in those quad sets to have him bomber in to try and add extra licks to number 6 and Claudia Musa to slow him down as best you can. I didn't know about Kane Stevenson when I made the pick, but obviously having that, and whether it's as a decoy, having him be able to assist in all the various ways that he does is major. And I'm hoping, just hoping, that we finally see Isaiah Smith get the ball running. We've not been able to see it so far this year, whether it's a product of scheme or him just getting his legs back under him. I want to see it going. Again, I was literally just on. I was so late on giving my picks to Dakota because I couldn't make sense in this one way or the other. But let's go Guelph at home. But I look for an outstanding matchup in this one. Tom, we have one more game on the Saturday slot, but we have to actually go to Sunday before we come back. A little dipsy doodle here with our time traveling skills, because we're going to take our show to the nation's capital for Panda Game 2024. The Ottawa Gee-Gees, the Carleton Ravens, duking out for who gets to bring home Pedro for this year. I believe Ottawa's won the last four. I believe last three or four, somewhere in that midst. They've been looking sharp with some of these incredible running games they've been having, incredible defenses. And Carleton, on the other hand, has been in the midst of a rebuild. They've had some great quarterbacks in there. They've had some really strong defenses, but we really haven't seen them on the prime time stage the same way we've seen for Ottawa. When it comes to Panda, it's seemingly anyone's game. We're seeing two teams here, one in Carleton that's made their mark in the passing game all year long, and that defense that takes the ball away and that is really, really fast. And for Ottawa, one of the best passing defenses in the league, our king in Charles Asselin, and a quarterback dilemma that it seems like they've finally sorted out. With this matchup, live from TD Place, noon on Sunday, October 6th, with no doubt 20,000 plus packing the stands. What are your first impressions of this matchup we have?
Going into this game, we mentioned it a little bit on the review podcast as well. Obviously, even the two of us, when we're thinking about, okay, this is what week 1 or week 2 for both of these squads, we're always thinking about Panda going into this game because it's arguably the biggest game of the OUA season getting into this one. And going into this, we're constantly saying, I don't know about this Ottawa offense. Ben Miracle hasn't really been playing well. Tristan Lefebvre goes down for Carleton. I don't know what's happening here. But it seems like both of these squads are coming alive at the right time. Elijah Barnes has been playing lights out football from day one here. He has really been doing his thing. 105 or 168 on the year, 1,548 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions as well. Certainly showing his youth in certain areas, but he has been playing outstanding football all year long for these Carleton Ravens. And Josh Jansen, last week against the Laurier Golden Hawks, 21 for 32 for 302 yards, no touchdowns, but no interceptions either. I think both of these squads and their offenses are finally starting to find their rhythm in time for the biggest game of the season, the battle for Ottawa, the Panda game.
Yeah, and as we've talked with players from these clubs over the years, this is a game that arguably has just greater stakes even than playoff games for them. This is a type of rivalry that we want for more of our teams, where if you're a Carleton Raven and you see an Ottawa GG on one side of the street, you're going to go on the other side. If after the game you're at one spot and you're seeing the black and white of the Carleton Ravens, you're saying, all right, GGs, we're pulling up to another place. This is true blood rivalry between these two clubs. There goes my computer dying there. Doesn't matter, because we can talk Ottawa football until the cows come home. For the Ottawa GGs, you mentioned what Josh Jansen's been doing, but for them, this year has all been about what Charles Asselin's been doing on the ground, second in the OUA in rushing yards, behind Jared Kasari. And the similarity with Kasari, as we've been saying, is that a bit banged up as a result due to having to carry that load for his respective club. You mentioned with Josh Jansen in the mix, what we were able to see him do last week. Find a guy in Gilbert Thibault that hadn't been on our radar. We hadn't seen Maxime Melifon either for them in a little while. So no doubt a lot of weapons. But with this Carleton defense, a defense that we obviously talk about Ife Onyeka, rightly so. He's out there competing with Kaladia Musin to see who's going to rack up the most sacks. Salas Hubert in that mix as well, obviously. Who's going to be perhaps the standout defensive lineman of the year, standout lineman overall. His name is certainly one that you have to keep in mind for him. But you look at what guys like Malik Youssef, look at what Schneider Cave Phillips been doing for them in the back end, a year where they still haven't had L. James Agamudo, and just all these weapons on defense that made them a really strong defense. Well, obviously, you mentioned offensively, and we'll get into some of those guys that he's throwing to, because this is a year where it's not just the Battle of Carleton, Ottawa. This is the Ferdinand Bowl. This is the Ferdinand Bowl. We'll get to that in a second, but again, it's a defense now where you have so many guys fly around the ball. And again, I had a few more written down that maybe you'll be able to help me out with, where I think similar as we've talked about with these teams, I think you have to say for Carleton, we need to load up against Asselin and see if Jansen beats us. Well, then so be it. Because especially if Melifon's not in there, you have to be able to trust in your secondary and your guys that you know have been able to do their thing all year long in coverage on the back end, and know that the front end can do what they can to try and slow them down.
Absolutely. But in going into this one, for these Carleton Ravens, especially this defense, it's so nice that they had the Laurier game just beforehand, because Laurier did exactly that. They loaded up against the run. Charles Asselin in that game, 13 attempts, only 36 yards on the ground. He does still have one touchdown in that one, but they really went into that game saying King Charles Aslan is not going to beat us in this one. Ben Miracle, whoever's in the back end, you're going to we're going to force you to make some outstanding throws. Josh Jansen gets in there and he does exactly that. You mentioned it. Gilbert Godot, excuse me, I butchered names.
Gilbert Thibault.
Gilbert Thibault, thank you so much. Really goes off in that one as well and does his thing. I'm really impressed with even Noah Avery and what he did. 6 catches for 119 yards as well in that game as the main bell cow. I'm really looking forward to seeing what is the capabilities here. And when you think about the throwing Josh Jansen into the mix, it's nothing that he isn't used to. He was the starting quarterback in that Panda game last year as well when Ben Miracle got injured and Ryan LeCandre got injured, and he played a hell of a game and they won that one as well. So I trust that Josh Jansen is going to be on his best game here, and I know that the offense is going to come alive. Even with Maxim Elefant being out, Noah Avery, and all of those guys are still going to be outstanding. And especially if Suleiman Kamara can be a legitimate running back, now King Charles can get out into the passing game as well and be just as effective. I like this Ottawa Gigi's offense.
Yeah, and you know what's so funny is thinking about that game from last year, a game that ended with Campbell Fair hitting a game-winning field goal from at the 55.
At the 55.
Windsor's Carleton lost the game earlier this year where it was a field goal kick by Brady Linzer at the 55. So maybe it's we're cursing those Ravens. But certainly love what they've been doing. And a couple of the names I meant to bring up earlier again on that secondary, guys like Ottman Braun, Zendra Aden Altador, as well as guys that are really effective for them in that secondary. And I love what you said about Josh Jansen. And he's had that familiarity with this offense, with a lot of these guys in there, with Charles Aslan, with Maxime Elefant, if he's in, what you mentioned about Gilbert Thibault, and Suleiman Kamara. So he has that big game experience. Let's flip the script now, because we look at this young guy, Elijah Barnes, who's been outstanding. Again, this is no longer a situation where, first off, shout out to the DJ here at Ron Joyce. This has been a rock and roll.
DJ Jukebox!
I love it, man. Playing Elijah Barnes, where this is no longer a case where it's, he's the backup quarterback filling in for Tristan Lefebvre. This is his spot. He has earned it. He's one of the best in the league right now, and he has a bevy of weapons out there who we'll get to in a moment. But you brought up something really interesting after last week's game, Carleton versus York, where Tristan Lefebvre was listed on this roster for them. And from what you've told me, that's just only been more confirmed for this one.
Tristan Lefebvre is confirmed. He is in. He is back. I don't know if he's going to be I don't know if he's going to be starting in this one. Certainly, when you look at it and going into this year, Lefebvre is your guy. Everything that he did from the 2023 season has been outstanding. But then Elijah Barnes, I went through the numbers already here. 105 for 168, 1,548 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's been playing some outstanding football, not to mention last game against York, 21 for 32, 357 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but he's the OUA Offensive Player of the Week. So, yes, you have Tristan Lefebvre back. You have a guy who's warranted and has really showcased what he's able to do. But you've got Elijah Barnes with the hot hand, and you've got him with the capabilities that he's been showcasing here. If you're that Carleton Ravens offense, who do you go with in this one?
I think you have it right. I think you roll with the kid who's been the hot hand for you this year. If there's a Tristan you're worried about for these Carleton Ravens offensively, it's Tristan Reddy.
Hell yeah.
Because his connection with Elijah Barnes has been so special. You add in the mix what Kasim Ferdinand's been doing all year long and all these other weapons, and them getting the rushing game going with guys like Rokup, with Matthew Morin, and Keyshawn Reed in the mix as well. This is turning into a really well-rounded offense for the Carleton Ravens. It's been the Elijah Barnes show. I don't think you flip the script. And if anything, part of the story of this game right now is you have 2 teams sitting at 2-4. 2-4 with the end of the season coming up quick. And it looks like the way the season is shaking up, if a team makes it, it's only going to be one from the Ottawa region. And you have to figure out right now, okay, Elijah's been our guy. And if we're going to end up with a game where we're going on the road in a big high stakes atmosphere, a lot of people in the stands. Okay, well, let's get Elijah ready right now. Let's have him suit up for the Panda. Let's have him keep doing the great things he's been doing. He also brings in that element of the way that they've been running their run pass options. Perhaps the sole reason that offensive run game has been coming alive. you can't just rely on the fact that a banged up Lefebvre is going to come back in and keep that offense going on the run in the running aspect. He's a stellar passer. I believe it was an upper body injury to begin with as well. So who knows just quite where he's at. Plus Elijah Barnes, a southpaw. So you have to add that into the mix. But brought up his name, Kasim Ferdinand, playing on the offensive side of the ball for the Carleton Ravens, one of the best offensive weapons in all Canada. And Denny Ferdinand, former Raven, now donning the garnet and gray of the Gee-Gees in the back defensive backfield, along with Patrick Cumberbatch, along with Kevin Victome, along with Tolu Ahmed, all these other great weapons on that defense. Daniel Briere in the middle for them at linebacker, filling the shoes of some great middle linebackers for the Ottawa Gee-Gees. But honing in specifically, Denny Ferdinand, Kasim Ferdinand, twin brothers on opposite sides of this matchup. This is, I can't think of a comp for this type of a matchup and how special this must be for these two kids going into this game.
Oh my goodness. When you talk about the emotions that are into this one, there is arguably no greater rivalry than between Carleton and between Ottawa. And similarly, in that vein, there is arguably no greater rivalry than a sibling rivalry in this one. To have both of these guys who are very legitimately, there's good chance they're going to be paired up against one another in this one. Obviously, if Kasim is playing a little bit more into that slot, maybe not because Denny's mainly been playing corner, but still, that is going to be the matchup to watch 100% in terms of how much they're really able to go. As you can see, all the excitement behind us with the boys getting ready in this one. But for this game, the thing I wanted to talk about, Windsor playing outstanding football, obviously, in terms of everything they're doing. And I did mean Windsor. They're second in pass defense. That's because Ottawa is number one in pass defense. Kevin Victome and Denny Ferdinand, along with everybody else in there, has been playing outstanding, lights out football. They are the team to watch in this one. That defense in the secondary is by far the best in the OUA right now. I'm really interested to see what Elijah Barnes is going to be able to do, even with guys like Tristan Reddy and Kasim Ferdinand. Once again, we've seen that he is younger. He is starting to make He's made a couple of mistakes before. He's still an outstanding player. Do not get me wrong. But how do they disguise coverages? How do they try to get up to him to get him off his game and to really get after him in that one?
And you still have guys like Hatchie and Brown in the mix for that offense for the Carleton Ravens. And going back to that Ottawa defense, though, you mentioned how effective they've been, tops in the league and stopping teams' passing attacks. And, again, there's a bit of that give and take because teams have run the ball pretty well against Ottawa. Is that a function of, well, we can't pass it, so we better pound the rock by hook or by crook, and we'll get what we can, and Ottawa just, by virtue of that, gives up some points? Obviously, we saw Windsor run the ball really well against them. We obviously saw what Tanner Nelms did last week, ran the ball really well against them. And there was a stretch of football in Ottawa the G's were playing where Patrick Cumberbatch was outscoring his quarterbacks, his offense. I think it was just the quarterbacks in specific, where he was getting a pick six, and then he was adding in the Ed Reed-esque, give me that thing and take it to the crib. But also what makes that defense special is talk about brothers, his brother and Eric Cumberbatch, we've seen banged up, and I don't know if he's there. And that's what gives me a little moment of pause with how good this Carleton passing attack has been, having to take on a bit of a banged up Ottawa secondary. Rejuvenated offense, yes, but what's kept them in ball games, what's kept them in a spot where they can be in a position to maybe still make the playoffs, though they're sitting at 2-4. Is that passing secondary. It may still be banged up, and that's what has me worried. Tom, any last thoughts on this one, or is it time to make picks?
Oh, getting into this one, it's going to be, this is must-watch football, yes. And this is the game that I'm so happy, and I hope this tradition continues, where it is on Sunday. It's the only game that's being played in the OUA, and I believe in U Sports as well at noon, so tune into this one. It's going to be outstanding. When you look at Elijah Barnes, and you look at Ifion Yakin and everything that he's been able to do in this one, 17.5 tackles, 8 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss. This dude lives in the opponent's backfield, and I expect him to be doing the same thing on this one as well. I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing everything here. Carleton looks strong. They look really good. I'm going with the Gee-Gees in this one. Josh Jansen comes alive. He finds his receivers. King, Charles Aslan, puts the crown on. He puts the team on his back, and he gets the win for this one. The Gee-Gees take the Panda game because, a little fun fact for you here, you mentioned it off the top, Carleton has not won the Panda game since 2017.
Ooh,
that streak continues. Ottawa takes this one.
Well, Tom, it's rare that we're on the opposite side of so many games, and I know we still have one to go where I think we might be on the opposite side again, but I'm going against my brand, my
Oh my
GGs.
God.
I'm taking the Ravens in this Panda game. I love that passing attack. I love the thought process of, hey, Lefebvre's back, and you look at this kid in Elijah Barnes, you say, hey, the veteran's back. It's still your ball game. This is your offense. Take us to the promised land. Break this streak. Get us in the playoffs. We saw what this Carlton Ravens team was able to do in giving Windsor a scare in the first round of action last year. Get ready for that playoff game. Starts with this Panda game. Give Elijah Barnes the experience of those high leverage, high pressure games. Stands filled, the crowd cheering and jeering and all sorts of things. This defense has been solid. I love Josh Jansen. I love Charles Aslan, but I love Carlton to be able to slow them down enough to give them the opportunities to outscore them. I see a lot of points scored in this one.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be an exciting game. I could see it being a game-winning field goal again, one way or the other. But to Mr. Forcier, Mr. Copeland, just make sure that if you hit a game-winning field goal, make sure it's from at the 55. Tom, there is a raucous affair going on right now. There's the music playing, the band was going this way and that way. We got the teams warming up. Max right behind us. Stands are still slowly filling in, but again, on this side of the concourse of the road going around the stadium, really seeing it fill in. It's time. It's homecoming 2024 for your McMaster Marauders hosting the Western Mustangs. A major battle for both these clubs. For Western, obviously having dropped the game already to Laurier and wanting to be able to still have a chance to get that first round bye. We know they're in the playoffs. There's no question about that. And for your McMaster Marauders, being in a position where having dropped some difficult games, having shown some outstanding things, no less than that win they had at Carlton a couple weeks ago. They're coming off the bye, hopefully rested and ready to go with this one. What's your first impression of this matchup?
This is a historic matchup between two-story programs, most definitely here. The McMaster Marauders obviously having a ton of potential in this one. They are the number one passing offense in the entire country so far, with that run game certainly not where you want it to be. Right now, McMaster, 2,061 yards of total offense, 1,700 passing yards, but only 456 rushing, which is one of the lowest in the OUA in this one. 128 points, 11 for 18 on third down, 87% in the red zone scoring points, 67% touchdowns. This offense knows how to score. They know how to do their thing. And now Keegan Hall is playing some of the best football that I have ever seen. You and I were at Western Western Queens last week. We were talking to a few of the guys, including my guy, Justin Hayes, and he confirmed Keegan Hall is one of the best players that he's ever had the chance to play against. This McMaster team and this offense, especially in the passing game, is one of the best in the entire country. My question going into this one, is the run game going to be there? Is the defense going to be there to back them up as well and to really be able to do that? Because I know that McMaster passing attack is going to be here.
And we've obviously seen Braden Kelly have some positive days on the ground rushing. The offensive line has been an improvement from what we've seen in the last couple of years, both in giving your guy in Keegan Hall the time to make those outstanding plays downfield and find the Jackson 2, find Priestners, find all these weapons that he has, Nicholas Adair, Everett Reed, all these guys that they have that make this offense so spectacular where they can go 5 wide, arguably 6 wide, and just know that, hey, give them 3 seconds, maybe 4, and it'll turn into a big chunk play, and we'll get the ball downfield. But of course, this is a Western defense that's been really spectacular. We know about Jackson Finley at safety, captaining that team. We know about guys like Richard Abdu before. We know that Kojo Odum's kind of on the cusp of coming back into this game. And obviously up front in the line back and forth with guys like Riley McLeod and Max Nixon and Jude Buchanan. Max Nixon, of course, being the one who sealed, signed, and delivered the win in Western, in London last year against Mac, where Keegan Hall was perhaps able to make a major drive to steal that game in London, and Max comes up with a pick 6. But you were bringing up to my attention, this Western defense is a little banged up in that secondary coming to this matchup.
Most definitely. Kojo Odum really not doing he hasn't been able to do his thing because he's still battling through injuries. He's been doing that for a little while. Richard Adu before had to go into halfback because I can't remember the gentleman who went down, to my apologies, but they had some injuries there. And Adu before at half terrifies me because now suddenly you have an option of sending a half blitz and Richard Ejiofor coming off the edge. That's a terrifying thought. But if he's out of the corner spot and no Coach O'Doon, Saunders isn't playing great. Don't get me wrong. But if there's two backup corners in this game, that's a massive piece going into this, especially against a team that loves to throw the ball more than anything. Know for a fact if Coach O'Doon has any capabilities of going, he's going. He's a gamer. We know that. But there's a couple of key injuries on this Western defense that might just affect the outcome of this game in that regard. So I'm really going to be looking to see where does a Ejiofor line up? How does that affect in this? And does that mean Jackson Finley has to go to one side to really help favor one of the guys who is injured? So really interested to see who comes out for this Western Mustang defense.
Yeah, and again, you were updating me on that. I don't know, maybe it's Jordan Murphy. I don't know who the injury is, but this is a situation now where we have one of the best in the business in Coach Paul Gleason with his Western Mustangs. He's seen everything that you could possibly throw at him, and a situation where we've talked about this back and forth with these matchups, where certain teams have better advantages in the run or in the pass, where certain defenses are more heavily favored in their secondary versus in the front, where you have to say now, as Coach Gleason, all right, Mac, hand the ball to Kelly. If you are going to beat us, you need to move the ball on the ground. If we're banged up, we'll go into a nickel package. We'll drop extra bodies out there. We'll go with a 6-man box. Hell, we'll go with a 5-man box if we have to run the ball. I dare you. Now, flipping the script. We'll probably come back to this as well. We have an offense for the Western Mustangs that, as always, is up there with the best in the business with Evan Hillock. We talk about homecomings. This is Hillock's homecoming. This is a
Hillock homecoming.
St. Thomas More legend from the Hamilton region. He knows what big games on this field mean. He knows what it means to come into this house and put up big numbers. The way they've been rushing the ball, Keon Edwards, Keanu Yazbek, getting Ethan Dolby into the mix, seemingly on all aspects of the game, and with guys like Seth Robertson, with Braden Masseri, with Mohsen Jamal. There's so many weapons. But Nola that we saw last week, up close and personal, is still banged up. And it's a defense for Mac that brings all sorts of pressure. They have great guys in coverage on the back end, guys that will pick the ball off from you, and a few guys that have been able to get after the quarterback. But it's a D-line for Mac that's still a little banged up as well. This matchup between the Western offense and the Mac defense, where does your mind go with that one? I'm thinking about the trenches because I'm an O-lineman at heart, and I think there's reason to draw attention to that off the jump.
Probably the most significant player who's not going to be playing in this one. There's obviously some defenses, some guys on the Western defense who might be a little injured. Mitchell Price is not playing for the McMaster Marauders in this one. That is a massive blow to the defense in a defensive line that we saw against Carleton not last week, but 2 weeks ago, where we saw that Carleton O-line move the entire D-line, reestablish a line of scrimmage down the field, and really be able to get some great things in the run game going. So Mitchell Price not being in this one against a Western team that loves to run the ball, I am very nervous about, most definitely. Drake Bodie is back 100% healthy in this one. So we're going to see some of the best that McMaster has with the guys that they have, certainly. But no Mitchell Price is a massive thing. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for Western, still no Keegan O'Neill, still no Sebastian Seabo. So they have some injuries of their own on that regard. But you and I both know this Western offensive line is going to be outstanding no matter what. Eric Anderson's going to be an All-Canadian again this year. He's playing some of his best football. This O-line is really going to be doing their thing. How much is McMaster going to be able to limit the run here and force Kellogg into those second and long scenarios to have him try to get that?
Absolutely. And honestly, like the way that Western's able to line up with that big quarterback and Jerome Rancourt and pick up the party just thinks, you know what? Let's just get under center with him and let him get downhill and just force this MAC defense to really get heavy in the box to take him on. But again, we saw this MAC team last year. We had them in that 50-50 club because they were in games like against Western, where they're playing 3 quarters of really strong football, and it falters at the end. We've seen that time and time again this year, where they put on a strong performance to start against Guelph. They end it well, but there's a middle period there where it kind of falters a little bit. Go back to that Carleton game. And again, Carleton team we just talked about that we're both super bullish on, right? We think they have so much skill, and they do it from start to finish. They're missing a few pieces on that defensive side of the ball, obviously. Offensively, again, we know how well they can pass the ball, move it downfield in chunks. For Mac to put together a 4-quarter effort against Western What do you need to see from them in this game to slow down Western and try to take advantage of their strengths in the passing game?
Anytime we have seen a Western team lose throughout the ages, because the formula is still the same, the number one thing you have to do is obviously limit them on offense, for sure, stop them as best you can. But your offense, the Masters offense, is going to have to move the ball and score as often as possible, or bare minimum, be able to flip the field and make sure that Western is starting at the worst possible scenarios here. You cannot afford to go 2-0 consistently against the Western Mustangs, because even if you have some formula to limit them so they go 2-0, they're going to pound and pound and pound and pound, and eventually they will break through. For this Western squad, it's not a matter of if they will score, it's when.
Yeah.
When they will score. This Western offense, 2,325 yards of total offense, 1,307 passing, 1,087 rushing. Now, they may not be at the top of either one of those categories, but this is an offense that's so well balanced, that's so deadly at any angle that they can burn you regardless of what happens here. The number one thing that they are first in, 228 points. They score points, they score touchdowns. In the red zone, they are the only team in the OUA that is 100% in the red zone. They are getting points no matter what, and 77% of the time it's touchdowns, which is once again number one in the OUA. These guys can score, these guys can move the ball. This is a very dangerous offense. Evan Hillock has been playing great. 80 for 125 in the year so far, 1,257 yards of offense, 10 touchdowns, which again, number one in the OUA, and 4 interceptions. You have to be able to limit them in this game. If I'm McMaster's defense, second and long is what you are aiming for in every scenario. Force Evan into obvious passing scenarios here so that you can get your guys to really get going here. We've seen McMaster get to the quarterback a few times, and certainly at the beginning of the year, they did a really great job, but they don't have a stalwart. This guy's going to be our pass rusher here. It's going to be off a twist. It's going to be off of additional blitzes. It's really going to be, how can you pressure Evan? How can you get him off of his game and try to force him into some bad scenarios, which doesn't happen very often.
No, it certainly doesn't. And, another thing that Western's number one in is in the yards they give up in the passing game, which is the top in terms of fewest yards per game. And again, we talk about Western year after year, they actually end up giving up more yards you might expect in that endeavor. And we often chalk it up to the fact that, well, when you score 40 points a game, teams are having to play catch up. And often teams pass the ball. And in garbage time, sometimes teams get that. For Western to still be leading the league in points, yet being number one in fewest passing yards given up, is so scary. And what else are they doing defensively that's a tick up from what we've seen in years past? Is they're not the top, but they're in the top 4 or 5 in number of sacks they're getting, which is something where we've seen in years past, when it's winning time, when money's on the table, and it's time to get things done, they've gotten to the quarterback. Look at those Laurier games last year if you need any validation of that. But they're showing that from the jump with a defense where they're using Jude Buchanan like an absolute monster, firing him from all aspects. And you can only do that when you trust the guys on your back end. Tom, I'm getting ready to that stage to make a pick. What else do you have on your sheet for this one?
So we've been talking about this passing attack. You can't talk about this McMaster passing attack without talking about Keegan Hall and everything that he has been doing. 133 for 183 on the year, 1,700 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, which, if you're throwing the ball 183 times in just 5 games for only 3 interceptions, I'd say that's pretty good. He's handling the ball pretty well. And even in a couple of those, it's been a receiver rather than him. Keegan Hall is playing the best football that he ever has. And I'm actually going to switch over to this one because I'm so damn excited. Keegan Hall is playing the best football he ever has. He's outstanding in what he does. He makes everybody better. My pick for offensive rookie of the year is Jackson Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
8 catches last game, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Carleton, against that defense that we know has a pretty stalwart against stopping the pass. So I really, really like what I'm seeing from this passing attack. Obviously, the run game really hasn't been there for a number of years with McMaster in this one. So it's going to be something that we're going to see here. If you do get up, not having the ability to run the ball effectively and having to go in the pass means that you risk stopping the clock, means that you risk giving the ball back to them. So that certainly goes against them. But in scenarios with getting into that game and getting into points, I like this passing attack a lot. He's going to have to be going up against Richard Adu before whoever's getting the potential injuries that are there. and arguably the best free safety in the country in Jackson Finley as well. So lots of things to really get into this one on. Absolutely. But I think I'm ready to get into my pick here. There's a lot of things that go into this. There's a lot of things that happen into what makes up an outstanding homecoming game. The atmosphere that's going to be here, the alumni that are coming back, the fact that this game is sold out for the first time in 10 years. This Ron Joyce Stadium is going to be bumping like you had to experience when we played back in our day. This is a outstanding stadium atmosphere. There's certainly a team that loves their football. And I'm going with the McMaster Marauders in this one. They come in and they get the upset against the number 4 ranked Western Mustangs. They've had 2 weeks of Western Week, which Western Week, you dial in any of your assignments that are going to push it back and make sure 2 weeks of Western Week, the number 1 passing attack in the OUA and in the country. Mac takes this one at home at homecoming.
And show off that little jewelry you're wearing there as well, Tom. I love the pick. I love the picks, plural. You go with Jackson Taylor. You have the name right, but it's actually a surname that's Jackson because it's going to be Tayshawn Jackson winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I'll make sure to send you some tissues to dry your tears when your guy's not winning that. He's been doing great things this year. And you know what? This might surprise people, but I'm actually going to go Hamilton football in this one. But I'm not picking McMaster. Oh, no, sir. I'm picking Savon Magnate Jones and Evan Hillock. Magnate Jones has moved on, but I'm going purple on this one. Shout out to my guy, Evan Hillock from St. Thomas More, repping Hamilton. The Hamilton kid comes into his backyard and picks up the win. The STM connection, even if he's not hitting his guy, Magnate Jones, we know that Hillock can make magic happen in high leverage games. Okay, sold out event. The Hillock hasn't played in the NBA Cups. He hasn't played in national champ. The hell does he care about this? He's played on this field probably more times than some of these Marauders have. Western's taking care of business. Appreciate you, man. You enjoy the day. This day's about you. But when it's all said and done, when the tears are dried, it's going to be because there's a Western victory in this one.
What a shocker. The biggest McMaster hater in the world picks against them.
Holy smokes. Tom, we're sitting here with about 20 or so minutes to go for kickoff. Hey, regardless of which way it goes, I'm sure it's going to be a great event. We're now starting to see the stands filling. The band is making their way around here again. The music's roaring. The teams have obviously headed back in, aside from the special teamers doing their thing. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great weekend time. Tom, final thoughts on today's events and everything going on around the OUA.
This is arguably, I know I say this every week, but when you look at this week in particular, this is almost rivalry week with everything that's going on with Mac Western, with Queens Laurier, with Waterloo and York. I think that game is going to be competitive. And the big thing, regardless of the standings, every team that's playing, I'm expecting a tight game, a good game. OUA football fans, this is going to be the week to really watch and re-watch some of these games because this is going to be outstanding football. I'm hoping to see a lot of things, including a Marauder win for a multitude of reasons, certainly. But I'm so happy and so privileged that we get a chance to do this with our guys in Royal Media helping us with the stream and everything else. With my guy and Zach Bader, Sam, I doing this. Nobody else I'd rather be doing this with, my man. I'm so excited for an awesome weekend of football.
Right back at you, brother. I can't wait to check this one out. Can't wait to check out all the games around the league, the Panda game tomorrow. And then you and I will have the privilege, as we always do, to break it all down for the podcast right here at the 55.